Spent money on your business before you started and wondering about how the tax works? Well, watch on. As a business accountant, my team and I spend all day long helping business owners on their journey. And of course, we help a lot of people start them and get involved at that early stage. And one of the key questions we see a lot, both online in the comments and also when we talk to prospective owners, is that they want to know, look, quite often the natural sort of course of things is that you decide, I'm going to go and do a business. And we've done other videos on what you need to do to kind of start that business. But it starts with this thought of, yes, I'm going to go and be self-employed. And in this video, we're talking primarily about the self-employed rather than the limited company aspect of that, although some of the rules are quite similar. What happens then is that you tend to go spend some money. You might go get some business cards printed, or you might go and register a website, and people worry about what does that mean if there's a delay between me starting and me spending this type of money. How does it work if, for example, I've got a laptop, a MacBook I always use as a good example because I sit there beavering away on one. What happens if I want to bring that into the business? You know, do I get any tax relief? And that is what I'm going to answer on this video. So before we get into it, if you like these type of videos, make sure to click the subscribe button below to get notified whenever we release more videos just like this one. So what happens to these expenses? Well, the short answer is you can get tax relief on them, providing, and there's two kind of main rules if you like, and that's that you incurred the expenditure within 7 years of starting the business, to starting to trade. And the second one is that they would normally be tax deductible. So a good example of this is you might go around sort of networking and taking people out for coffees and things like this and paying for other people's coffees. Now that's effectively entertainment. Entertainment's not normally tax deductible. It's like it's an okay business expense, you're fine to do it, it's just there's no tax relief on it. So in that instance, any of those type of expenditures, you're not going to get relief on because you wouldn't normally get relief on. So those that's kind of, I suppose, an obvious one is that, yeah, if you would normally get tax relief on it, you're going to get tax relief on it, providing it was done within 7 years of starting a business. Now you might think, why 7 years? But actually there's a lot of the tax law that 7 years is quite an important time frame without boring you on the details, but that is the rules. So, and what happens effectively is you count as incurring them on day one of your trade. So, you know, if you started buying a website and doing things like that in, say, you registered a domain name or you had some business cards printed, those kind of expenditure, and it was in the back end of December because you thought, you know, between Christmas and New Year, you had a lot of time on your hands, you wanted to start it, but you didn't actually get going then because January came and you're busy and you didn't get going until February, then effectively they count as being incurred in February. So that's the easiest way to think about it. I mean, in reality, when you fill out a tax return, nobody's asking for the dates of every transaction. It might be important further down the line when we start talking about, say, making tax digital, which is a new thing coming in a few years' time. But for now, yeah, just know that in theory they're counted as being on day one. Now, we also spoke about the bigger items, so stuff like you might have, I could use a van, let's use a MacBook to start with because it's slightly easier. So you got this MacBook, you've had it for a few years, you want to use it now primarily in your business. You know, it's going to be wholly and exclusively for the use of your business. So you're thinking, okay, what are we going to do? Well, you can actually get tax relief on it, but as you imagine, you bought it at, say, 2,000 quid 5 years ago. It might be worth, I don't know, 500 quid now, might be worth 50 quid, who knows? What you should do is go and have a look at eBay, some of the other online places, and get some evidence as to what you think the market value is right now, because how it works for tax is that you're going to bring it in at the market value it's worth now. So if it's worth 500 quid now, that's the value that you're going to bring it into your business. Now, I'm not going to go too much into detail on this here because that's a whole video in itself that I think we'll do soon if we haven't already done it by the time you're listening to this. And that's talking about the two different bases that you can prepare your tax return on. It's not very well known, but there are two kind of ways you can do your tax return. One's on what they call the cash basis, which means that, and there's rules to say whether you're allowed to be on the cash basis. And that's things like when you sort of add up what goes into your tax return, you just add up what you physically paid out and what you physically received, and that's effectively what goes on the tax return. It's very simple. I think a lot of people do this without knowing that's what they're doing. The kind of normal basis is that you would, they call it the accruals basis, is what us accountants love, which is effectively, if you, let's say you raised an invoice for work you did during March, right at the end of the tax year, 31st of March, you've issued this invoice. If then it goes out and isn't paid, then you, under the cash basis, you wouldn't count it in that year. But under normal rules, you'd count your invoices almost like on dates, if you like. You'd count that invoice as being income inside of that tax year, not in the next tax year. So little side tangent, but the reason that's important is depending on whether you're on the cash basis or the accrual basis, depends on what boxes and what rules you use to claim for that MacBook. If you're on the accruals, you're likely to use something called capital allowances. And if you're under the cash basis, you might include it in your expenses, but that's probably for another video. But all I want you to know is that there is some tax relief available to it. And sometimes, depending on the rules, depends on whether you'd get relief in 1 year or whether you'd end up having to spread it. So with a MacBook, it's quite likely you might get relief all in 1 year when you bring it into the business. With something like a van or a car that you use, you might find it's a lot further spread over many years, depending on the rules. So, but do know that you will get tax relief on these things. And that's the basics. So quick recap. 2 rules. 1, expenditure within 7 years. Secondly, that it would normally be tax deductible. If you're going to bring in those big items, they're going to be at market value, and you need to check whether you're using capital allowances or the cash basis rules. And again, there'll be more details on these, I'm sure, at a later date if we haven't already recorded it already. If you've enjoyed this type of video, make sure to share it with people that you think would find it valuable. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.